All right. This is my AP Research practice presentation on college recruiting and anxiety high school lacrosse players. Mental health issues are among a more prevalent issue across athletes in the high school and college level. Anxiety is a emotional experience, state-like, trait-like, and meta-experience, and a component of psychobiological state, which can be described along 5 basic dimensions: form, content, intensity, context, and time. Over 40 million adults in the US, 19.1% have an anxiety disorder. More on anxiety. Anxiety disorders affect 31.9% of adolescents between ages 13 and 18 years old. And focusing on this research study myself, that is like our age demographic, more of like in the age of like 16, but is within that range. Research shows that untreated teenagers with anxiety disorders are at a higher risk to perform poorly in school, miss out on important social experiences, and engage in substance abuse, according to the ADAA. And then more context on the process itself for recruiting in lacrosse. The process starts your junior year, starts on the date September 1st. This is going to be a long and stressful process for many kids. It can last for over a year, and people it just causes a lot of stress. Why this topic is interesting to me: I'm currently going through this process. I have been since September 1st. The process has been long and tiring. I've seen effects throughout my daily life, and that's why I'll go into later on why I chose my method. I have friends currently going through this process. I had friends go through this process, and I have friends next year who will also be going through this process. And then relating it to anxiety, I chose to focus more on anxiety when looking at this research because in the past I had severe anxiety, and this did correlate mostly with school, but also I did have some effects in lacrosse. So this leads me to my research question: how does college recruiting affect anxiety levels in high school lacrosse players? First prevalent overall broad topic that I found when going through my lit review was on-field anxiety. When the physical symptoms of anxiety are too high, they can interfere with your ability to compete. Moreover, negative thought patterns and expectations of failure can create a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's evidence that younger athletes have a higher levels of competitive anxiety, or CA, in the somatic dimension and in the state condition, but the effect size is too small. So when looking at the demographic of the ages of 16 and 17-year-olds going through a recruiting process, competitive anxiety can be prevalent. My second theme is recovery for athletes and mental health. Research shows that the combined demands of elite sports and school can negatively affect mental health. This can include stress, burnout, depression, anxiety, and a skew of perceptions of performance expectations, whether that be in school grades or on-field expectations. This can increase the risk of injuries and illness. Elite young athletes have to cope with multiple psychological demands, such as training volume, practices, mental and physical fatigue, spatial separation from family and friends due to all the time that they separate for doing homework, studying for tests, or going to practice. This ends up being an issue with time management problems and may lead to reduced mental and physical recovery. When looking at young athletes, 95% of these young athletes reported that they have high levels of stress in the research study done by Weber. So this leads me to my method. The method I chose to use was a narrative inquiry. A narrative inquiry records the experiences of an individual or small group, revealing the lived experience of a particular perspective of that individual, usually primarily through interview, which is then recorded and ordered in a chronological narrative. When conducting my research, I used a narrative inquiry, which led me to use a semi-structured interview when doing my interviews. In my semi-structured interviews, I had a list of questions, around 15 to 20 questions, and I had at least 1 or 2 sub-questions based on my initial set of 20 questions. This led me to come up with more results. It is often recorded as a biography or life history, or in the case of older ancient traditional story reporting, oral history. My personal experience and qualifications for narrative inquiry, since I'm going through this process right now, I was able to also answer my questions and then provide further context about how the process is going for me right now and how effects I've seen myself. In their responses, I include my own. I will identify, when doing the analysis of my data, I identified if the respondents are experiencing any of the following: feeling restless or on edge, being irritable, getting tired easily, having difficulty concentrating, or feeling my mind goes blank, or their mind goes blank, and then taking that and like telling a story based off of that, based on their responses. My results, an overarching theme that was prevalent throughout the data analysis was the similarities between myself and the two other student athletes in regarding anxiety before as well as during the recruiting process. In collecting the data used to answer the research question of how does college recruiting affect anxiety levels in lacrosse players, the narrative inquiry was highly effective. It allowed me to conduct interviews, but then tell a story of myself as well as the athletes interviewed. Both of the athletes interviewed are very competitive athletes who identified that they were hard on themselves before the recruiting process started, but then this trend started to take like an upward arc when they started going into it. When asked if they believed that they became increasingly hard on themselves due to the recruitment process, they said yes, and I also responded yes in my own personal responses. Moreover, both athletes experienced symptoms of anxiety, such as feeling on edge at times, as well as having restless nights before, more of like in the week before, and then during the recruiting process. Not every day, not every night, but more of maybe once or twice a week. When the interview got into the point where they asked whether they had restless nights, both respondents agreed on the same level, as well as myself. Athlete number 1 and athlete number 2, as well as myself, they said before and after, there was an increase of pressure on field and in the classroom. Both athletes identified that they are very good student athletes, averaging around like a 3.8 to a 4.0 GPA, and they said that when they would get like a scoring test, such as like an A minus, B plus, even if the test was hard, they were hard on themselves, felt more down on themselves for doing not as well as they expected or wanted to do. For the athletes number 1 and 2, both are committed, and once they committed, they saw major increases or decreases of anxiety. They no longer had restless nights, and they felt less pressure in the classroom, more at ease. Discussion. After conducting the interviews and transcribing everything that was said, I found like 5 major components when doing my coding. I said the sleeplessness was evident. All 3 were contacted on September 1st, or the recruiting date, more critical of mistakes on the field and more critical of the mistakes off the field. They felt more jittery and on edge after the process started. Being restless and experiencing less sleep was evident in myself, and this can be attributed to the fact that I was not personally contacted by college coaches on September 1st compared to my counterparts, athlete number 1 and athlete number 2. According to Sunny, people who are plagued with worry often ruminate about their concerns in bed and anxiety at night, and they can keep them from falling asleep. So that's what I attribute to restlessness, another sign of anxiety. And then also there was increased self-criticism, like I described earlier, with all 3 of us kind of feeling more critical of our mistakes on and off the field. Conclusion, these players are not considered highly recruited in the lacrosse world, and further research would be done to see like the difference between the levels of anxiety of a highly recruited or like ranked type player. And then also I would be interested in like seeing like the correlation between either like female, because this was only all male, like all boys, and then I would also like provide a further insight into the clear effect that the recruiting process can have on a student athlete. Also starting this research at the start of the process and doing more of a study instead of like more of like a narrative inquiry where I kind of took what they had in the past, but more like start on the day that the process starts for them. I think this will help me go more in depth and be more descriptive on like the feelings that they had as well as myself. I originally planned on doing 3 high school lacrosse players and maybe even 4. With the limitation of time, I was only able to conduct 2 interviews, but then 2 interviews with the 2 players and then myself. My main limitation that I said was time deadlines to get the drafts turned in, and then with more time, it would be possible to dig deeper into like further effects that the recruiting process could have on a student athlete.